Okay. Have you ever noticed like how what you wear kind of matches how you feel? Like when you're having a bad day, you just want to put on like the comfiest sweater.
Yeah.
We're going to be diving deep today into an article that explores that link.
Oh, cool.
It's called What Does the Tightness of Our Clothes Say About Our Emotions? You'd be surprised.
Interesting.
And it's by Moya Sarner, who is an NHS psychotherapist.
Okay.
And it just came out this month.
Wow, so it's really recent.
Yeah, so we're getting in on this like as soon as it's out.
Very cool, very cool.
And so what's really interesting to me about this is that it kind of goes beyond that whole dress for success.
Right.
It's really about clothing as like a reflection of your inner world.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. So Sarner starts out the article with the story about a jumper that shrunk in the wash.
Oh, no.
And it turned into this, like, she describes it as a woolen wetsuit.
Oh, wow.
And at first she's kind of annoyed, but then
Yeah.
she finds herself weirdly comforted by wearing this like super tight jumper. Huh. That's so interesting.
I know, and that's what I thought too when I was reading it. I was like, huh. I
Yeah.
wonder if there's something more to this.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that feeling of being enveloped, almost like a hug.
Right.
I think it's a great example of like what we would call emotional containment.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you think about it, we all crave feeling safe and secure.
Yeah.
Both physically and emotionally.
So the jumper, even though it's restricting in a way, it's
Right.
giving her that sense of boundaries.
Exactly. It's like providing that sense of containment.
Is that what that means?
Yes, exactly. Containment is that feeling of being held, of having boundaries, of feeling safe.
Oh.
And I think it's really interesting because it suggests that like when you're feeling overwhelmed internally,
Okay.
you might actually seek that feeling of being held externally.
Like almost to counterbalance it.
Yes, precisely. Like a counterbalance, a way of creating a sense of order and stability when things feel chaotic inside. And I think Sarner talks about this in the article, right?
Well, she does. She mentions things like skinny jeans, shapewear, anything that creates this kind of psychological skin,
Mm-hmm.
especially, when our inner world feels really chaotic.
Yeah.
Those outer boundaries, that physical pressure can be very reassuring.
I mean, this makes me think about those weighted blankets that people are really into these days.
Right.
Is that tapping into a similar need, do you think?
That's a great parallel. Absolutely. I think weighted blankets, even certain types of hugs,
Oh, interesting.
they can provide that sense of pressure that some people find really soothing.
Oh,
It's actually fascinating how this need for containment manifests differently for everyone.
yeah.
Some people find it in highly structured routines,
Okay.
others in really minimalist spaces.
Oh, wow.
Even the way we decorate our homes can be a form of containment.
So it's like we're all kind of looking for that just right amount,
Yes.
like Goldilocks.
I love that.
It's too loose and
Yeah.
we feel adrift. Too tight and we're suffocating.
Exactly. That's a perfect way to put it.
And what I thought was even more interesting is that Sarmer talks about how her own like clothing preferences changed
Oh, really?
as she went through therapy.
Wow.
She started choosing looser clothes as the process went on.
So like as her inner world was getting more, I don't know,
Yeah.
sorted out through therapy.
More organized.
Yeah.
She didn't need that external
Support. Precisely. It's like the therapy was helping her develop a stronger sense of self,
Okay.
internal boundaries, which in turn reduced her reliance on those external forms of containment.
That's fascinating.
It really is. And it raises a question, I think.
Hmm.
Could our evolving clothing choices actually be a sign of personal growth?
I mean, now that you say that, I'm thinking about times in my life where I've made big changes.
Yeah.
Like, career moves or relationships ending.
Oh, yeah.
And I can definitely see how, like, my style shifted too.
Wow.
Almost without me even realizing it at the time.
So subconsciously.
Yeah, like my clothes were almost reflecting that inner transformation.
That's such a powerful observation.
Yeah.
And it really speaks to the heart of what Sarner is suggesting, which is
Okay.
our clothing choices can be like a window into our emotional landscape, both consciously and subconsciously.
This is already making me rethink my whole relationship with my wardrobe.
I know, right?
But before I run off to do a closet purge,
Okay.
there's another point that Sarner makes that I thought was really intriguing.
What's that?
She talks about the importance of letting go,
Oh, interesting.
both in terms of like physical clutter
Mm.
and emotional baggage.
Right. So like letting go of things that are weighing us down.
Exactly. And that's where she brings it back to that shrunken jumper story.
Oh, okay.
Even though it was bringing her comfort,
Yeah.
she kind of realizes that she's clinging to it.
Uh-huh.
maybe out of a fear of letting go of the past.
Oh, that's interesting.
And she connects this to a bigger idea, which is, what are we holding on to? Clothes, relationships, beliefs
Right.
that might no longer be serving us.
That's a powerful question.
And what might we gain by releasing them?
Oh, I love that.
It's such a good question.
It is.
It makes me wonder, like, what are some common ways people hold themselves back
Okay.
by not letting go? Is there a connection, do you think, between this idea of letting go
Yeah,
and this containment that we were talking about before?
that's a fantastic question. And I think you're right. There's definitely a connection there.
Okay.
Sometimes in our quest for that containment,
Yeah.
we can inadvertently create these metaphorical cages for ourselves. We cling to routines, possessions, even to certain versions of ourselves
Oh, wow.
out of a fear of the unknown.
Right.
But I think true growth often requires us to step outside of those comfort zones, to let go of the familiar and embrace the potential for change.
So it's almost like that saying, sometimes you have to let go of the shore to discover new oceans. You need that space to grow, but letting go can be so hard.
Yeah.
It definitely can be.
What are some practical ways that people can actually start doing this?
That's a great question.
Both with physical stuff and
Yeah.
those tougher emotional attachments.
Right. Well, I think it all begins with awareness.
Okay.
So let's take your closet as an example.
Okay.
Before you even touch anything,
Yeah.
just think about what emotions come up when you look at your closet.
Huh.
Do you feel overwhelmed,
Right.
anxious?
Yeah.
And then as you start sorting through things,
Right.
ask yourself, why am I keeping this?
Right.
Is it guilt? Sentimentality? Fear of needing it someday?
Oh, that someday.
Yeah.
Fear. That's so real.
I know, right?
I'm totally guilty of that.
We all are.
But what about the emotional side of things?
Right.
That feels way trickier than donating a box of old clothes.
It is trickier, but I think the same principle applies.
Okay.
Awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Just start by simply noticing those thoughts and feelings that keep popping up.
Maybe it's that critical inner voice
Right.
or replaying a past mistake over and over.
Yeah.
Just observe it. Don't judge yourself. Just notice it.
Okay, so once we're more aware
Right.
of what we're clinging to,
Mm-hmm.
how do we actually loosen that grip?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
And some of that stuff is deep-rooted, right?
Absolutely. And that's where therapy can be incredibly helpful.
Okay.
A therapist can provide that safe space
Yeah.
to explore those patterns, to challenge negative self-talk, and to develop healthier coping mechanisms.
It's like having a guide
Yeah.
for that inner closet clean out.
Exactly.
Someone to help you sort through all the messy emotions,
Yep.
figure out what to keep and what to toss.
I love that analogy.
Yeah. But even outside of therapy, there are things people can do on their own right.
Absolutely. Things like mindfulness practices, journaling, even just talking to a trusted friend.
Yeah.
These can all be really helpful for processing those emotions.
And starting to let go.
Exactly.
All this talk about letting go
Yeah.
reminds me of something that Sarner mentions in the article
Okay.
about how her clothing choices became looser and more comfortable
Oh, right.
as her therapy progressed.
Interesting.
It's almost like, as she was working through things internally, she naturally released that need for external constriction.
That's such a brilliant connection.
Yeah.
It really speaks to that idea that true change starts from within.
Right.
As we heal and grow internally, our need for external validation or containment often diminishes.
It's like as we build that inner sense of security and self-love,
Yes.
we no longer need to rely on those external crutches to hold us up.
Exactly.
We find that strength and support within ourselves.
I love that.
And that's so powerful.
It really is.
So to bring this back to our listeners for a second,
Okay.
what would you say are some signs that someone might be clinging too tightly to those external forms of containment?
That's a great question.
What should people be looking out for?
Well, here are a few things to consider.
Okay.
Are you overly attached to certain possessions?
Okay.
Do you have a hard time adapting to changes in routine? Do you find yourself constantly seeking approval from others?
Right.
these might be signs that you're relying a bit too heavily
Yeah.
on those external sources of security.
Those are really helpful
I
insights.
think so.
And I think it's important to remember, like, this isn't about judging ourselves or others.
No, not at all.
It's about recognizing those patterns
Right.
and exploring ways to cultivate a greater sense of, like, inner peace and stability.
Exactly. It's about empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
Empowering ourselves to create a life that feels grounded and fulfilling,
Right.
regardless of what's happening in the external world.
I love that.
Thank you.
This conversation has really given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
It's amazing how, like, a seemingly simple article about clothing choices can lead to such profound insights
Yeah.
about personal growth and emotional well-being.
I completely agree. It's a testament to the power of observation
Yeah.
and the importance of paying attention to those little details.
And you know,
Yeah.
as much as I love that metaphor of the shrunken jumper,
Mm-hmm.
I'm also starting to feel like maybe it's time to let go of that image.
Oh, really?
It feels a bit
Yeah.
constricting.
Ha. I love that.
It's like I'm embodying
You are.
the very essence of this conversation.
Sure.
Recognizing that even our metaphors
Yeah.
can become limiting if we hold on too tightly.
I think you're right.
So if we're going to expand this conversation even further,
Okay.
what are some other metaphors we could use
Hmm.
to describe this process of letting go,
Yeah.
creating space for growth?
Ooh, that's a great question.
What comes to mind for you?
Well, it makes me think of a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis.
Oh, wow.
You know, it's a process of transformation
Mm-hmm.
that requires letting go of the old form
Yeah.
in order to embrace the new.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Or maybe it's like a seed
But
breaking
sure.
open and sending its roots deep into the earth,
Yeah.
drawing nourishment from the darkness in order to reach for the light.
I would love that image.
It captures that idea that sometimes growth requires us to surrender to the unknown,
Yes.
to trust the process even when it feels uncomfortable or uncertain.
Absolutely.
And maybe it's also about remembering
Yeah.
that letting go doesn't mean forgetting.
Right.
It's about honoring the past,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging the lessons we've learned,
Yes.
and then moving forward
Right.
with a renewed sense of purpose and clarity.
Beautifully said. It's about integrating those experiences into our personal narrative
Right.
and allowing them to inform our present and future choices.
This conversation has really opened up a whole new way of thinking
I'm so glad.
about personal growth and the importance of letting go.
Yeah.
But before we dive into the final part of this deep dive,
Okay, I want to pause for a moment
that sounds good.
and just invite our listeners to reflect
Mhm.
on what we've discussed so far.
I think that's a great idea. Let's give everyone a moment to process these ideas
Yeah.
and to connect them to their own personal experiences.
So as we kind of move into this final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I'm struck by how much we've expanded this whole idea of containment, beyond just clothing.
Right. Like it's more a universal concept.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder, are there any universal truths about this need for containment?
Mm.
Or is it totally unique for each person?
It's a bit of both, actually. Like
Right.
the need itself, I think, universal, it's kind of wired into us as humans.
So it's in our DNA.
Yeah, you could say that. Think about babies.
Okay.
They need to be swaddled,
Yeah.
held close.
To feel safe.
Exactly, to feel safe and regulated.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a primal form of containment right there.
So we're basically hardwired from the get-go.
I think so. To crave that feeling of being held,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's physical or emotional,
Exactly.
but how we seek it out.
Right.
What actually brings us that feeling of security.
Yeah,
That's where individual preferences come in.
I think so. And it's not static either.
Okay.
Our needs evolve as we grow
Right.
through different life stages, different relationships,
Mhm.
even just our moods on a given day.
That makes me think about how some people just thrive in those bustling cities,
Right.
surrounded by constant activity,
Yeah.
while others need the quiet solitude of nature
Yes.
to feel grounded.
Exactly. And both are forms of containment,
Totally.
just expressed in totally different ways.
It's fascinating.
It is. And what's even more interesting, I think, is sometimes the things we use for containment,
Yeah.
they can actually become a bit unhealthy
Oh, really?
if we're not careful.
Like how so?
Well, like holding on too tightly to routines,
Okay.
getting overly attached to material possessions.
Right. Or even just people.
Yes, exactly. Or relying too heavily on another person
Mm-hmm.
for your sense of security.
Okay, so it sounds like a healthy approach
Yeah.
involves finding that balance
Mm-hmm.
between internal A&D, external sources of support.
That's a great way to put it.
So it's not like one or the other.
No, it's about that interplay.
We need to build that inner foundation
Yeah.
of self-love and resilience,
Mm-hmm.
but also recognize that it's okay to seek comfort
Right.
and support from the outside world too.
Absolutely. It's about having a diverse toolkit
Mm-hmm.
of coping mechanisms,
Okay.
things that help us feel safe and regulated
Right.
when life throws us curveballs.
Inevitably.
Exactly. And it's also about recognizing when
Okay.
a particular strategy might be overused or maybe becoming less effective over time.
This whole conversation is making
Yeah.
me realize how much I rely on my morning routine
Oh, really?
to feel like centered and ready for the day.
Interesting.
It's like my little ritual of containment
I love that.
before I step out into the chaos.
Makes sense.
What about you?
What are some of the things you do for containment?
Yeah, what helps you feel grounded?
Well, for me, nature is huge.
Okay.
Whether it's a walk in the woods
Mm.
or just taking a few moments to watch the clouds.
Yeah.
Being in nature really helps me to reconnect with that sense of
Yeah.
something larger than myself.
Takes like a reset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly calming.
It's a good reminder that sometimes the simplest things
Yeah.
are the most powerful
Absolutely.
when it comes to finding that sense of peace and stability.
It doesn't have to be complicated or elaborate.
Right.
It's about finding what works for you
Yeah.
and incorporating it into your life.
And making it sustainable.
Exactly.
As we start to wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I keep coming back to that idea of letting go
Yeah.
as such a key part of creating space for growth.
Mm-hmm.
But letting go can feel so daunting.
You can.
What encouragement would you offer to listeners who are maybe hesitant to take that leap?
Well, I'd say start small.
Okay.
Remember that trunk and jumper?
Yes.
Maybe it's not about purging your entire wardrobe,
Right?
but just identifying one or two items
Okay.
that you're holding on to out of habit,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe even obligation.
Yeah.
Letting go of those things can be really symbolic
Mm.
and pave the way for bigger shifts.
And maybe it's not even about physical objects.
Right.
Maybe it's about letting go of a limiting belief
Exactly.
or a negative thought pattern or
Mhm.
even a grudge you've been holding on to.
Those internal shifts can be
Yeah.
even more powerful.
Then decluttering your physical space.
I think so.
And letting go doesn't have to be like a one-time event.
No, not at all.
It's an ongoing process.
Exactly.
It's a journey
A continuous journey of self-discovery.
and growth.
I love that.
This deep dive has truly been a journey.
It has.
And I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this whole topic.
It's a big one.
But I think we've given our listeners a lot to ponder.
I hope so.
What's one final takeaway that you want to leave them with?
I'd encourage everyone to approach this whole idea of containment
Okay.
with a sense of curiosity and compassion.
Okay.
Notice the ways you seek it out in your life.
Yeah.
The healthy ones.
Right.
And maybe the not so healthy ones.
And remember, there's no one size fits all.
Exactly. What matters is finding what brings you that sense of
Yeah.
peace, security, and wholeness.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
And I think the key is to remember that we all have that inner capacity for growth and transformation.
We do?
Sometimes it just takes a little bit of awareness,
Right.
a willingness to let go,
Mm-hmm.
and a whole lot of self-love
Absolutely.
to unlock our full potential.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a true pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
The pleasure was all mine.
And to our listeners, thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you've enjoyed this exploration of clothing, emotions,
Mm-hmm.
and the human need for containment.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep diving deep
Yeah.
and keep seeking those nuggets of wisdom
Mm-hmm.
that make life a little bit richer.
Until next time.
Bye for now.